Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery, and I got a couple trays that I'd like to check in on. There are these two that you see down here on the floor. One's actually a worm bin, 17-day-old worm bin with African nightcrawlers in it. And that the material that those worms came out of was held onto and placed into this tray here, where it's just sitting as what I refer to as a cocoon nursery, waiting for cocoons that might have been left behind by those worms in the material that they inhabited to just eventually hatch, produce some baby worms that could be reintroduced to the original population. And then we'd have something we could really treat as sort of a completely finished batch of vermicompost. Week has passed since we fed this bin and made sure moisture was good in this bin. They're only 17 days old, these systems. So, they're going to look that way. They're going to be just full of bedding, not a lot of castings yet. And there too, 17 days, not quite enough time yet even for most worm cocoons to hatch, so probably not a lot of action going on there quite yet. We just want to make sure that the material is nice and damp so that when babies do start emerging, they've got a comfortable space to live in. So I'm going to put on a glove and we can get to work. So let's get started. I had to chuckle. Right when I turned off the camera a moment ago, I looked down and I was already wearing my glove. I forgot that I had put it on before. So we're good to go. Let's get started. We're going to get into the cocoon nursery first. I was even thinking maybe in a couple more weeks we might actually start seeing some little worms in here. I mean, we could start seeing some worms in here already. Like I said, I just want to make sure that the material doesn't seem excessively dry. The plastic covering is imperfect, so it's not sealing the airflow around the edges. So the air is permitting some of the material out here on the very edges to get a little bit drier. But castings, you go down a little bit, you're already getting into some nice material that's holding its moisture just fine. And out here in the middle area, where the plastic was certainly covering things, the moisture is, equally fine. Stuff all crumbles pretty nicely. If I do find a chunk that's sort of clumping, I can break that pretty readily as well. I guess if it was maybe a little bit drier, the stuff might crumble even more readily, but I don't feel that it would be a good idea to go much drier than this, because the worms do require dampness, and this could just be borderline. So I think we're going to do the same thing we did last time. We're going to get out my little water bottle here, which is luckily topped off and ready to go. And like I did last time, I wanted to make sure the moisture is not just sprayed sort of superficially on the top. I wanted to get it down lower. So I don't think it makes much of a difference if you're kind of creating a little bit of a disruption within a cocoon nursery. There's no worms yet, or if there are, they're pretty puny, probably very hard to see. So every now and then I just want to give myself a moment to see if I do notice anything squiggling or squirming. But like I said, it might be a little early for that, so let's not consume too much time trying to force something that's not going to happen. I might go a little bit more generous on the moisture application today than I had gone last time. I don't want to create a big disgusting mess here, so I am kind of putting it in carefully. I don't want any sort of little standing puddles of moisture or whatever going on in here. Oops. Putting a little dash of dampness onto the surface of the stuff that I just pushed over, and covering it up and doing the same for the next layer. So I don't know for sure, I wasn't paying that much attention, but I think this probably is a little bit more moisture than what we sprayed in last time. So we're going to put the plastic covering right back on, more or less the way we found it when we got in here. Letting it go pretty much edge to edge to cover this as thoroughly as possible. so that the dampness can be preserved. And then we just continue giving the system more time. So yeah, I mean, these cocoon nurseries are a little bit boring in the beginning, but it's kind of cool when they sort of begin springing to life over time. I don't know if they're even available anymore or whatever, but when I was a kid, there was these things, they called them sea monkeys. You would get a little packet of, I think they were really dry brine shrimp eggs. And once you put them in water, they rehydrated. You got these little things swimming around in the water. It was like spontaneous life, you know. It was kind of a cool little thing to do as a kid. And when I do one of these systems, I almost feel like I'm going through a similar experience watching something very, inanimate turning into something that's full of little creepy crawlies running all over the place. All right, let's get the other bin out here that's actually got some worms in it and get them fed. All right, let's see how this sucker fits into the frame here, because this is a somewhat larger tub than I've been using lately in a lot of my videos. It's the larger size tub that I actually sort of started out my vermicomposting in, but then I found one. Actually, I had one or two of them already, but then I found a source where I can get the ones that are just a little bit narrower. They're pretty much the same length and depth. It's just their width is a little bit less, and it permits me to put 3 of them side by side on that shelf that I've got. And 3 of these larger ones would not fit. So that's part of the reason I was kind of gravitating a lot towards the slightly smaller containers that I've got. But I keep thinking to myself, it's a shame not to have these larger containers in service doing stuff, so I've just gone ahead and started using them. Now, I guess one of my main concerns with new bins, such as this one, not even 3 weeks old yet, is just the nature of the material that it's made out of. All these leaves, paper, who knows what, cardboard. It's all stuff that somehow just doesn't have a good tendency on its own to preserve moisture. They all sort of permit the evaporation of the moisture that's held within them to occur pretty readily. And that's the reason I usually protect my newer bins with plastic coverings to limit, or almost pretty much eliminate, evaporation. And I'm starting to wonder if it might be a good idea in this bin to do the same. I do feel like it is a little bit dry, definitely on the surface. You don't have to go down too deep though, because it is pretty comfortable, especially now that we're getting closer to the middle, which is where the last feeding was applied. Provided that the foods that we gave them were able to start decomposing and breaking down, then, you know, those frozen potato peels, I believe they were, would hopefully be emitting some moisture. And it could be that what we're seeing here is just a little tiny fragment of remaining potato peel, because I see a lot of other similarly shaped items. Somehow they don't look like my bedding. You know, if you had to put them in a lineup, it would be difficult to distinguish some of this bedding from the peels of the potato. And I kind of worried because I've got potato going on elsewhere, but the potato I've got going on elsewhere, I think it's in my outdoor worm bag. That potato never got frozen. That stuff was just thrown into the system raw. I sliced it up into some smaller pieces, and I applied it to my worm bag that's outside. And that must have been almost a month ago now, and I still bet there's pretty good size, fairly fresh, crunchy chunks of potato in there that are nowhere near breaking down. So it's pretty remarkable when you start to see the difference in how quickly things break down once they've just had a chance to be frozen and thawed. They really kick into high gear when it comes to the breakdown process. So we got a good number of worms just all over the place down in here. And these newer bins, when it's, you know, all kinds of light colored materials all over the place, it's a little tougher to see the worms. If this stuff was all a lot more mature as far as the breakdown process. If there was a lot more castings and less paper and leaves and stuff, then we'd be able to see the worms a little bit better. This is just a little fragment, what's left of cantaloupe rind. You probably recognize it just from its appearance. So my only concern here is that the food I'm going to be bringing down for them, because I didn't come down here prepared with food for these little guys. I figured I would scope out how the potatoes are coming along and then gauge what to give them and how much based on the progress they'd made. And I think we got to give them high marks for doing a great job breaking down most of what they got last time, as far as just the kitchen scraps type food they got. They would have probably gotten some bedding too, like maybe this probably went in there as a chunk of bedding last time. It's just a coffee filter. Something like that's not going to break down right away. It's usually the frozen foods that you're giving them that's going to break down a little bit more readily. But they'll nibble away at all that bedding too and eventually turn all that into castings as well. Maybe this is the side where there's no worms. I think every handful on the other side seemed to produce a bunch of worms. That must have been right next to where the foods were, because the material is even much more damp. So I sort of got right there on the dividing line of, oops, let's get this guy back in the bin. Like where the food was. And the food was luckily producing a good amount of moisture, and I think that might be a large part of why the worms are all congregating there. Perhaps not so much interested in the food itself, but probably more for the moisture. So this bin, I think, definitely could use a good boost in moisture. I'm trying to think if I've got anything in the freezer that I can apply that would produce a good amount of moisture as it thaws. I don't know. It's just my preference usually to try to limit my addition of moisture into systems, try to limit it to the moisture that's held within the foods that I feed them, so I don't make a common practice of getting my squirt bottle out and dampening my everyday worm bins. It's something that I just kind of never really do too much, but lately I have been doing it. And there's really no reason not to do it here if it seems like it would benefit the system. So I'm wondering if, as long as we're in here and we're kind of handling all this stuff anyway, maybe it would make good sense just to go through this bin really quick and give it a quick squirt. As long as my bottle still has a little bit of water left in it, what the heck, let's use it up. Couldn't hurt. And then I won't feel so panicky. I am tempted to maybe switch over to covering with plastic on this system, at least for a while, at least until I've got a larger number of castings in here. Alright, I think I'm running a little bit low now, so we're going to finish off with that. Nice little injection of moisture down into this system here, but I've kind of undone my feeding pit where we're going to apply the feeding, and I'm wondering if this might be a fun bin to do this in. So what I'm referring to is something that I've been wanting to do for a while, is and I created a whole bunch of sheets of cardboard that might be useful for it, which is to do a little sort of mini lasagna bin. And lasagna bin is just, I don't know if you know even what lasagna is. It's a food where different ingredients within the dish are layered one on top of each other. There's sauce, there's cheese, there's pasta, noodles, whatever. That same concept comes into play with just creating a couple layers in which you've got some food and then a good sizable chunk of bedding like this, and another layer of food, and so on and so forth. It doesn't have to be terribly big. I thought maybe I would take a couple of these and cut them in half, and then we would create ourselves a little mini lasagna stack, maybe 4 layers deep, and then feed in that fashion. Change things up instead of doing things in the same old method. So I'm gonna head upstairs, get some food we could use for that, and we could forget about feeding down in this pit. We're gonna have to set up something for this lasagna feeding. It should be fun. So we've got 4 pieces of cardboard, perhaps the size of a a smartphone, a little bit wider actually. And I'm thinking, yeah, there's no reason we couldn't do it right in the middle, just to stay with sort of consistent approach. So why don't we just do that? We'll stick to doing it in the middle. We'll have plenty of space to do so. I think we'll be safe in terms of not piling anything frozen on top of any worms, because we will start out with a sheet of this lasagna layer #1 cardboard. What I bought down here for them was a whole bunch of plums that were starting to develop little signs of mold. I've got a couple bananas. One of them even includes one that was all bruised up. By the time I ate half of it, I started realizing that it was pretty banged up. And I just didn't feel like chewing on a bunch of nasty bruised up banana. But I figured the worms would really appreciate it. So we'll make that into layer #1. It's going to be a little bit of a bulging layer there. The middle of it sort of popping up, but we can fill in the space with some coffee. I was just going to grab this. I was going to grab this one out of here and just bring it down here as a single item. But the filter sort of tore open. I've got coffee flying all over the place. So we'll use more of that coffee in another future layer, but we've already sort of magically applied some already. Let's get the rest of it out of here. I don't think we'll give him the other one. We've got plenty of other stuff here. Right, so coffee, banana, cardboard. Let's include a little bit of pulverized eggshell as grit, plus a touch of supplementary bedding, not that we even need it, because each of these layers is going to be bedding. We've got the coffee filter itself that's going to be bedding. Onto this next layer, we'll introduce some of these plums, and I also had a pretty nasty looking little plum tomato here to sort of break the color pattern a bit. Make another layer out of that stuff. And yeah, these include the pit, so we'll have probably a little pile of pits here, hopefully, in a little while after the worms have done away with the fruit itself. And we could dress up this layer here with more coffee. Instead of reaching for some shredded newspaper, we could use up this filter right here as the supplementary bedding for this layer of lasagna. Maybe we'll skip grit on this layer, but we'll add a little bit more momentarily when we build the next layer. Let's see if we could just support this thing out a little bit better, because it's getting tall. I don't even know if I can go much further. Well, I've got one more piece of cardboard. I guess we can use that as sort of like a top covering layer. I don't even know if I want to use many more plums here, because they do sort of add to the vertical height of this contraption pretty drastically. We've used pretty much all of the coffee we bought over, except for a little bit that's still over here, so we'll drop that in. And I don't even think we need more bedding. We can just top this feeding off here with a little bit of grit, and then sandwich the whole thing underneath one final hunk of lasagna. I guess the cardboard here is simulating the pasta layer. And get the whole thing covered up. So nice little injection of moisture for these little guys. I think they're going to appreciate it. Give them a little bit more opportunity to explore the rest of the bin, as opposed to avoiding all that dry material. The feeding, I would think that those plums are going to emit moisture. I would think that those frozen banana peels are going to emit a little bit of moisture. I think we're in good shape here. The coffee even had a little moisture included in it. The only thing that we added that was dry was the cardboard layers. But I'm going to kind of hope that what's in here is sufficient for the worms, and if it's necessary, they'll gravitate towards the decomposing and thawing food to satisfy their need for additional moisture if it's not enough. But I am gravitating towards using plastic as a covering here. It's funny, I've got a little mound here in the middle, but I got a feeling that's going to drop significantly pretty fast. And this will just indicate to us where the lasagna is down below. But it's usually around here that I would put on a plastic layer, or maybe underneath it we could put in another layer of paper like so. But you know what I could do is I could trade in our top covering of cardboard with another similar one, which I once enveloped in plastic, so it's sort of cardboard and plastic covering integrated together into one. So we'll swap it out. It should be, I think, for this size container, or pretty close to it. So the whole thing's kind of teetering on the on the precipice of this mound I created here in the middle. Like I said, I think this is going to drop. What the heck is this thing? Anybody recognize this weird looking little colorful insect? I don't like them. I'm getting rid of them. So I step away for a moment to wash that dead bug off my hand, and I come back and what do I see? 2 more. So they must have moved in on this piece of cardboard here. Whatever the heck these things are. Gosh, I don't like them. I don't like them one bit. Alright. So maybe instead of using this piece of cardboard, which might have more of these little guys on it, maybe I gotta swap something out of here. But you know, the selection of a piece of plastic to cover up the bin and all the other stuff I gotta do around here in terms of putting things away and getting things cleaned up, that's so boring. I'm not gonna waste your time with that. So before I take care of these last few loose ends over here, let me just really quickly say thank you. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate your company. Hopefully we'll see you back here again another time. But before you go, please don't forget, if you like the video, leave me a quick thumbs up. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel too. That's really appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.